Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown, and alongside me, as always, Brad Kelly. We've got an action-packed show for you guys today. A ton of draft options with the Saints, the Steelers, and then tomorrow we will be doing the Vikings and the Jaguars. But today we've got two special guests joining us, John Sigler of Canal St Chronicles to talk about the Saints, and then we've got Jon Ledyard of NDT Scouting and FanRag Sports, and now also of Pro Football Weekly, to talk the Pittsburgh Steelers with us. But before we get into any of that, I need to let you guys know about Cover One, the brand new app. You need to check it out today on your App Store, Google Play, whatever it is. It's simple. All you do is go to your App Store, search Cover One, and then you click download, and it's right there for the rest of eternity. It's fantastic. You download it, and you stay up to date with all the great content that we've got coming out on cover1.net, from mock drafts, scouting reports, film analysis, whatever it is. Go to Cover One, search the app, and it'll be right there at your fingertips. We'll have you covered with all your football needs. Joining us now, John Sigler of Canal St Chronicles with SB Nation. John, how are we doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, guys. We kind of robbed the Chicago Bears of a pretty good wide receiver today, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We got you on talking the Saints and what they're doing with their draft. How do you feel about Cameron Meredith and that whole signing? Pretty much like you said, stealing them from the Bears.
Man, I did not expect them to actually land him. I really thought the Bears would hold on, especially at the price point the Saints established for him. I know that was a popular narrative based off the Kyle Fuller situation, how that went down. But, you know, I'm very excited about his potential in this offense. I mean, he's such a clean fit as far as who can line up in the slot, who can line up outside, who can buddy up with Michael Thomas, and form one of the great young wide receiver duos for the next 2 years here in New Orleans. I'm very, very approving of that signing for sure.
As far as they're gonna, like you said, pairing Meredith with Michael Thomas, and they also have Ted Ginn and Willie Snead, and I'm a big fan of Willie Snead. I've mentioned that a few times. Do you think that wide receiver was maybe a draft option for the Saints before this signing, and do you think that now wide receiver is off the board as far as the Saints draft plan?
It kind of is and it isn't. I think it definitely removed wide receiver down the list of their priorities. So Sean Payton has talked about this at times. The way the Saints structure their off-season strategy is they look at each position group and decide if it's something they must address. Like that's the top of the board, something they've got to get done, versus a need, which is something, we need to have it, but we don't need to move heaven and earth to go after it. And then we've also got it as something we kind of would like to upgrade. We want to upgrade it, but it's not something we really have to put over anything else. And so what this does is it bumps that wide receiver down from a must address to a need, or maybe even just something they would want to get to at some point. So looking at reported Saints visits so far, they've been hosting lots of day three guys, prioritized undrafted free agents. These are the guys they've been using their official visits on, flying guys down into the city, hosting them at the private facilities. We're talking guys like Robert Foster from Alabama, Cedric Wilson, Boise State, Byron Pringle, Kansas State. Just go down the list. But here recently they've been looking at guys who are probably top 100 pick material, guys like Cortland Sutton, Deion Kane, Anthony Miller, Auden Tate is another one. So this is a position they're definitely doing their homework on, and it's one I would not be shocked to see them address in the draft. They've got 5-6 picks on the draft's third day. Depending on how trades shake out, they'll probably end up using one of those picks on a receiver, and I think it would be money well spent. They've only got two guys on the roster right now who caught more than 10 passes last year, and that's Michael Thomas and Ted Ginn. Willie Snead just fell off the map kind of out of nowhere. I mean, we were all fans of them too, just like you guys. He had 2 really strong opening years, and then he just couldn't get right last year.
John, ever since the Saints lost Jimmy Graham, it seems like there's just been a glaring need at tight end. Can you tell us a little bit about the tight end position right now and maybe some tight ends that they're looking at?
Yeah, so the tight ends the Saints have had, they've really got 2 different specific types, and they've got guys who can line up in line, work as a blocker, occasionally receiver. That's your Josh Hill, your Michael Huamadounui. And then you've also got Kobe Fleener, who is more of a receiving specialist in that Jimmy Graham mold. Well, since they signed Kobe Fleener, he's been concussed 5 times, and he just has not been able to be the guy they thought he would be. So what the Saints have done is invested a lot of time this offseason in looking at all of the top tight end prospects. Mark Andrews was their first private interview at the Senior Bowl in Mobile back in January. Sean Payton recently flew out to meet with Hayden Hurst in South Carolina. They've otherwise met with pretty much everybody that I'm aware of: Dallas Goedert, Mike Gesicki, Durham Smythe, Ian Thomas. They've done their homework on the tight end class as a whole, and I definitely expect that to be a pick that they go after kind of early in the draft. It's not at 27, definitely at 91. That's something to look for. Yeah, they signed Benjamin Watson back in free agency, but it's a 1-year deal. He's 37. I don't think he factors into their draft plans a whole lot, as probably more as lessening the priority at tight end than anything else. Kind of like Cam Meredith does at wide receiver.
Right. And what about linebacker? I mean, switching the focus over to the defense, I know you guys have A.J. Klein, Demario Davis, Alex Anzalone, and Monte Teo and Craig Robertson. There's quite a bit of talent there. But do you think at all they take a look at adding any pieces to that linebacking core?
Yeah, I would expect them to. They recently re-signed Michael Mauti. He's been a long-time reserve linebacker, and he and Craig Robertson are two guys who, when they were first signed, these were guys the Saints expected would be, a fifth man in the rotation, a special team specialist. What's ended up happening is due to injuries at the position and, lackluster play, Craig Robertson has gone from a backup will linebacker to your starting Mike the last 2 years. So these are guys they definitely want to push down the roster. They don't want to lean on them as hard. They want to get some more assets in there. So to that end, we know they met with Rashaan Evans and Leighton Vander Esch as official top 30 visits there in New Orleans. This is the position they're looking at in the first round, and I think they would love to have either one of those guys available there.
Is there a defensive tackle that you really like? I know they've got, Tyler Davison and David Onyemata as far as their starting 2 defensive tackles, but how do you feel about either one of them as their starter? And do you think there's an upgrade in this draft? Because I think this defensive tackle class is pretty deep. Do you think there's one that you could maybe take somewhere in this draft that potentially would be a starter down the line?
Yeah, there's 2 guys I'm a big fan of as that, fourth defensive tackle. But the Saints have 3 strong guys already in Sheldon Rankins, and like you said, David Onyemata and Tyler Davison. But they could definitely upgrade that third spot over Davis and maybe get a new nose tackle into the future, because he's going into a contract year. And what we've seen around the league is teams don't pay nose tackles. They draft one, let him play out the rookie deal, and then let him go somewhere else so they can draft a new 2-down player. A guy I'm watching like a hawk is Poona Ford, nose tackle from the Texas Longhorns. The Saints have drafted a Shrine Game defensive tackle each of the last 4 years. That's wow. Tyler Davison, David Onyemata, Trey Hendrickson. I mean, it just goes back several years, ever since Jeff Ireland took over the scouting department. And the guy that they were heavily interested in this year was Poona Ford. They met with him at the Shrine Game, touched base again at the NFL Combine. They sent the D-line coach to his pro day at Texas. So he's someone who's I would definitely, I've got him in all of my mock drafts going to the Saints and Sharpie there on the third base. So he's someone I definitely think they'll make a move for at some point. And Ford does not have the box score to get you too excited, but if you watch him, I mean, the guy was born to play nose tackle. He's kind of short, so he has that natural leverage that we've seen guys like Geno Atkins and Aaron Donald take advantage of. But he's not a pass rusher. He just holds his anchor, does his job kind of quietly. He's the kind of guy who a smart team would pick up later in the draft. And, he didn't get the NFL Combine invite, so his stock may be a little bit down, and maybe he's someone who could kind of hit the ground running there coming on in the later rounds of the draft.
Yeah,
as far as this, go ahead, Russ.
I was going to say, we saw him in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I thought he had, a couple of great reps and then bad reps. So I think there's some inconsistencies. Obviously, being a combine snub, that definitely doesn't hurt or it doesn't help his stock at all, and it definitely hurts his stock. But I think the explosiveness that he possesses is something that is rare for a player of his size. I think he'd be a really good fit for them. I like the thought of him later in the draft. I mean, I know he's probably going to be available day 3 of the draft. So if the Saints get their hands on a player like that, I think it's a home run pick for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a guy to keep an eye on for sure. So you heard it here first.
Shifting gears and looking at the Saints secondary, it was much improved this past season, with the additions of Marshawn Lattimore, Marcus Williams, and those are probably long-term starters, but going forward. But as far as this draft goes, could they be looking at a corner, kind of a long-term solution opposite of Marshawn Lattimore, maybe as an upgrade to Crawley? And you envision them maybe looking at a corner in the first round, or is it more of a pick 91, pick 127 type of need?
Yeah, they could definitely take one there at 27, but not necessarily because they're targeting the position. That what they want to do through free agency is set themselves up for a wide open draft, so they can just take the best player available at every pick. They don't got to move up for somebody. So if a player like a Jared Alexander or Josh Jackson, if he's there at 27, yeah, the Saints are going to run the podium for him. But I would rather see them go after someone kind of like a Mike Hughes type later in the draft. While I say later in the draft, that's just the second, third round. But they definitely need more bodies there at corner. P.J. Williams was pretty well thought of coming out of Florida State. He just has not, between injuries, some terrifying concussions, just bad luck, he hasn't really been able to find a role for himself. King Crawley played as a really strong number 2 last year. I think it was Ian Wharton puts out his cornerback handbook every summer, and he had some really great things to say about Crawley. That when you watch the tape, you can go and see it. He was a very competitive corner. He's kind of grabsy. He's kind of a penalty magnet. I believe he had almost 9 penalties last year, I think, which is not ideal. But you're talking about a second-year undrafted free agent out of Colorado State, so you kind of. That's kind of what you see on the package there. So I could definitely see them going after corner guys they're interested in. Look at Duke Dawson out of Florida. He's kind of a slot specialist, which is the same deal with Patrick Robinson, who the Saints brought back from the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's someone who could kind of fill in there. Other guys they're looking at late, there's J.C. Jackson out of Maryland. They've had on a top 30 visit. There is what's his name? Where'd he go? Lyndon Stevens out of Cincinnati. The Saints love going after these 6 foot even, 195-pound cornerbacks from these schools up in the Northeast. They do it all the time. They're an undrafted free agency. They kind of have it tight there. So watch those guys there in the later rounds. But as far as earlier in the draft, one player a lot of Saints fans are really excited about is Saron Neal, the very versatile defensive back out of Jacksonville State. He's worn a lot of hats. There he's played safety, slot corner, single high safety, box safety, whatever. He's done it all there. And that's what the Saints were doing with Kenny Vaccaro this past year. There at the end of his time here. So he's someone they met with at the Senior Bowl. He made a really strong impression. I could see him being somebody they target there in the middle rounds of the draft. Other names I like is Darius Phillips out of Central Michigan. He's just a playmaker. He fits what the Saints look for as far as a hyper-competitive, solid athlete who can come in and, just really disrupt the passing game right away.
The common question with teams with, veteran quarterbacks, Drew Brees, obviously, getting near the end, is there a successor in this draft that you would like to see them take to him? Maybe Mason Rudolph or Lamar Jackson. If either one of them are on the board at 27, would you be okay with one of them being drafted?
I would prefer Lamar Jackson, and if Mason Rudolph was there in the 5th round, I'd be okay with that. But I don't see it with him. Jackson does so many things well that you can see him just fitting the Saints offense like a glove. Sean Payton loves to stress defenses horizontally. We saw it with Alvin Kamara this year. They ran a lot of option runs with him, which was a cool new wrinkle that really opened things up for the underneath passing attack. And that's something Lamar Jackson could do really well. His threat as a runner really limits how defenses can defend him and defend the offense as a whole. So I love the fit there. I believe it was Arigalco of the Optimum Scouting put out his monthly podcast update this week, and he made a point to set the odds for where Lamar Jackson's going to land in this year's draft. He says, or he claims off info he's hearing from around the league, there's a 50% chance that Lamar Jackson plays for the Saints, 50% chance he plays for 31 other teams. I mean, according to him, the Saints have shown the most interest in him. Yeah, he said for the betting guys, set the odds at a minus 110 for the Saints, minus 110 for every other team. So,
wow.
So the Saints' interest in Jackson is pretty well documented. Sean Payton spoke just glowingly of him last month at the NFL owners meetings in Orlando. Lamar Jackson came down to New Orleans yesterday, as reported by Nick Underhill, the New Orleans Advocate, for an official top 30 visit. The Saints sent their quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach, and defensive backs coach to Louisville's pro day. Sean Payton was, as I mentioned earlier, he was busy meeting privately with Hayden Hurst, South Carolina, so he wasn't there, but they sent every other quarterback relevant position coach to Louisville to take in Jackson's pro day and apparently set up a meeting for yesterday. So he's the number one quarterback on my watch. It was Baker Mayfield, but as far as I'm concerned, he's a future New York Jet, so he's not going to be there at 27. So, we're seeing all these rumors swirling about Lamar, interest from the Los Angeles Chargers, New England Patriots, but I mean, depending on who you ask, the Saints are at the top of his list, so we'll just see how that plays out. But he's who I would prefer if they don't wind up bagging him in the first round. And let's be realistic; it's probably not happening. I just think he's going to be picked too highly for him. Then I could definitely see them going after a quarterback on the draft's third day, just somebody who can come in, push Taysom Hill for that backup job because Tom Savage isn't going to do it, and just see if they can find someone who can. Take over the place kicking duties, help hold the ball for Will Lutz later this fall. So somebody like Mike White would make sense there. Kyle Oleta would be possibly a good fit as just a pure backup quarterback. Maybe not the answer for the future, but somebody who can come in and just kind of be a sounding board for Drew Brees and the coaches,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a quarterback that they like. I would definitely agree with Lamar Jackson being probably the best fit for them as far as where they can get him. Do you think they move up at all to get him?
Yeah, they've been aggressive before. They trade up at some point in every draft. Last year they moved up for, let's see, who was it? Alvin Kamara. They moved up for him. They made another move, as I recall. I may be mistaken, but they moved up for David Onyemata. The year before, they moved up for Damian Swan, former corner out of Georgia. They're always aggressively trading up in the draft. They just are very careful to gauge the risk and the return on investment. So I could see them moving up to say the 20th overall pick. If Lamar falls there, maybe they leapfrog a couple teams, get ahead of the Bills, the Patriots, whatever they got to do. Now, as far as trading up into the top 10 picks for him, I think that might be a little too rich. I don't think they're looking to invest multiple first-round picks in any player, anyone in general, whether that's Lamar Jackson or Odell Beckham Jr. I just don't think that's in the cards for them. So it's something to watch, a trade up from the Saints. And, lots of fans, we would prefer they trade back, get more assets, especially lacking that second-round pick from the aforementioned Kamara trade. But I would definitely be on the lookout should Lamar start to fall and get down to around that 20th pick range.
John, where can we find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can follow me at John, JOHN _Sigler. That's SIGLERRR. Just Sigler was taken last I checked. So thanks for having me on, guys. And if you guys are interested in the Saints, NFL draft, whatever, give me a shout, give me a follow on Twitter, and it should be a good time.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, John. That's Jon Sigler with the Saints, Canal St Chronicles with the New Orleans Saints on SB Nation. Before we jump into our final interview for the day, Cover One, the podcast, is brought to you by First Down Playbook. First Down Playbook is the #1 playbook resource for football coaches with over 30,000 plays. First Down Playbook is a database of youth, high school, and flag football plays, color-coded with coaching points for every position on every play. Check it out today at firstdownplaybook.com. That's First Down Playbook. One place, all the football. All right, and joining us now on Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast, Jon Ledyard of FanRag Sports and NDT Scouting, also the host of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast and a contributor now with PF Weekly, so Pro Football Weekly. Jon, how we doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you joining us. We've got you on. We're going to talk Steelers, talk a little bit about the safety class and kind of where this class is as a whole. We've talked a little bit about Minkah Fitzpatrick at the top with Derwin James, but we want to talk more so about what falls behind those guys. But before we do, I want to ask you, is Minkah Fitzpatrick listed as a safety on your board?
Yes, he is. Yeah, I mean, I wrote a piece about this actually for NDT Scouting this past weekend, but there's different classifications of safety. I feel like we honestly would almost be better off putting them in 2 or 3 different categories, when we're talking about them. So he is a safety on my board. It doesn't mean necessarily that he'll be used like people traditionally think of a safety, but I think that's the position that I would list him at.
Okay. And then after, outside of Minkah and Derwin James, where does it kind of fall for you? I know you're a big fan of Justin Reid. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, Justin Reid's my third safety on my board. I actually have a first-round grade on him. I wasn't really anticipating that. The first game I watched was the game against USC. That was like his only real bad game in college, and he was pretty rough in that game. He had a nice interception, but overall he just had a really hard time in man coverage against some of the smaller, shiftier slot receivers. So maybe that's not his role in the NFL, but he did really well in other games against guys who weren't quite as twitchy. I think that, if he matches up with tight ends in the slot, that's something he can do. He's good against the run. He's physical as a man cover guy, which is important. Derwin's really, really consistent at that, and I think Reid has some of those same similarities. So there's a lot of traits that he gives. It's his size, his speed, his athleticism overall, how cerebral he is as a player. He wants to continue to get better and better. The guy just studies the game like crazy, and one of the smartest players in the draft as it relates to football and stuff off the field. So a guy you're just not going to have to worry about from that perspective at all. Loves talking the game, loves learning. So I think he overthinks some things at times, but I think that can be worked out of the system. I think he has all the tools and the traits that you want, and he plays a single high role on occasion at Stanford. He told me to check the Notre Dame game because I was really not sure where to find him in that role, and I finally got a hold of the Notre Dame game and watched it, and he is not really tested in that game. He did have one pass breakup when he kind of was tested from a center fielding spot. He came over pretty near the sideline and knocked a pass down. So not a big sample size of him there. He's played there in practice a lot, I know. But I think that his traits really suggest that he could be good in that type of role too. So to me, his versatility is off the charts, and I would love to. For me, we're talking about Pittsburgh. I feel like he's the ideal target in the back end of round 1.
If the Steelers were to pass on a safety in round 1 and maybe target one in rounds 2 and 3 at picks 60 and 92, are there any other safeties in the class that kind of fit what they're looking for?
Yeah, that's the key, I think, fitting what they're looking for, because I like guys like Ronnie Harrison and some others, but they aren't really what the Steelers need. The Steelers really, Mike Mitchell played kind of a single-high, true free safety role, and he almost never, came away from that type of a position. And now they have Morgan Burnett, and he's probably going to play that big slot type of role, so that takes some of those guys off the table that fit that role. Maybe like a guy like Dane Cruikshank from Arizona, might take him off the role because that's kind of what he would do in the Steelers defense or in the NFL. So there are less single high guys in this class, which is why I've kind of said that if the Steelers want to get one, and I think they do, you probably need to go early. Jeremy Bates might make it to their pick in the second round. It seems like it's looking more and more like he won't. So he's a guy that I would definitely target. I think the Steelers honestly could take him in the first round. He is the player they've shown a lot of interest in during the pre-draft process. Deshaun Elliott's got some ups and downs for Texas. I'm a little bit worried that he's so inconsistent. The whole defense is kind of inconsistent for the Steelers. And, I don't want to get another guy that's inconsistent, but I could see them being interested in his ball skills. They really need a playmaker. That's what they need. And you're really unlikely to get those guys later down in the draft. It has happened a couple times in recent drafts, surprisingly. But, overall, I've seen a little bit of Tarvarius Moore from Southern Mississippi. I don't know that the Steelers have shown any interest in him, but I think he has maybe some traits that they'd look for in that type of a role. But most of the guys in this class, they're not really, don't really project to that type of a role for a defense. And I think that one guy that I wish they would show more interest in is Jeremy Reeves from South Alabama. I haven't heard anything on that front for the Steelers, and another guy day 3. It sounds like he's going to be there day 3. Steelers have really liked Ohio State players, and Damon Webb played a little bit of everywhere for Ohio State, but he really did show some nice instincts, some nice range from a single high spot in the times that he was there. So I would be interested in him as well. But, looking for a true safety, there's a lot of those hybrid type of safeties in this year's class that are really intriguing, but not a lot of the true free safety type of players.
Justin Reid is a guy that, I was asked today, is there a player that would surprise you to go in the top 20? I know you've got the first round grade on him. Would you be surprised if he went in the top 20 of the draft? Maybe a team like Seattle at 18. I know they've got Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, but with his versatility, I think he could play just fine with them in their defensive backfield.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think it's out of the question. To me, I think that with Reid, there's going to be teams that are interested because he's going to be so impressive to them in interviews. He's going to be so impressive to them in so many other regards that I think that they're going to be they feel like it's a safe investment, basically, to take a guy like that. So I can't say I blame him because the way that he's performed on the field, they're going to hear about him from coaches, the way that he is in interviews and stuff, he checks those kind of boxes, plus the ball skills he showed. A lot of guys can get picked, but look at the way he got picked this past season. What he showed on tape in order to obtain interceptions, I mean, he wasn't just having tipped balls fall in his lap. Like, he was going out and making plays. And so that's kind of stuff teams will always get really excited about, pay a premium for, and really projects better to a single high roll than certainly Derwin James and maybe even Minka Fitzpatrick. So I could see it happening. I don't know if the need lines up for a lot of teams, but certainly there's probably be some interest from a team like Dallas. Could even be some interest right in there, right inside of or right outside, right before the first 20, the 20s in the first round.
As far as other positions go on the Steelers defense, they could be targeting a linebacker because we know what happened to Ryan Shazier. Are there any linebackers at the end of the first round that interest you? Maybe Leighton Vander Esch from Boise State or Rashawn Evans out of Alabama, or I know you're a big fan of Fred Warner a little bit later, but can you speak on who would probably fit the Steelers system the best out of those guys?
Yeah, I think that the Steelers are always looking for athletes. So pretty much any position that you're looking at for Pittsburgh, it's going to be an athlete. Single high, you always have to have a guy, like you said, that has ball skills and range and things like that. And maybe athleticism, your pure combine athleticism is a little less important. But for linebacker, for edge defender, both needs for the Steelers, they're going to be looking for athletes, especially to play in Ryan Shazier's role. I mean, honestly, Fred Warner fits what they're looking for a lot if they're looking for a guy outside of round one. I don't know if Warner's going to go quite that high to be their pick in round one, but he's a guy that really fits the role. And I think another guy they would consider in the second round is probably Jefferson from Texas. I think that when you look at Jefferson play, he's kind of exactly. It pains me to say it, but he's the Steelers' MO because there's inconsistencies, there's lots of missed tackles. Sometimes you wonder what the guy's thinking on the field. But at the same time, there's flashes of really brilliant play. And especially this past year, Texas moved him and played him as kind of a weak side guy, and he just wasn't asked to think and process nearly as much, so he just was kind of playing. And so I think that allowing him to use his athletic gifts kind of gave an indication of how the NFL will use him. The disadvantage and the downside to him is that he just misses too many tackles. I mean, I think every year at Texas he missed like 13 tackles, and that was according to Pro Football Focus, and they're very lenient with their missed tackle numbers. So I think he probably had what you and I would consider way more than that. That's just too much inconsistency, and Pittsburgh cannot afford to have another inconsistency. I mean, it was the issue all year last year. Communication, not having a quarterback on the field defensively in terms of being able to communicate, being able to get on the same page with coverages. Blown coverages were the full reason. When people think it's a lack of talent, it's not. It's a lack of communication, a lack of coaching, and a lack of player leadership on the field that's the issue, especially in the back end. So, I just think that whoever is that player for the Steelers has to be the hub of communication. Granted, that'll probably be Vince Williams to start the season, but that player is going to have to grow into that type of a role, and I'm not sure I'd ever see Malik Jefferson being that type of player. So, for me, that's the concerns I have with him. In the first round, I think the guys they'll consider are Leighton Vander Esch if he's there. I've heard it's very unlikely that he's on the board now by the time the Steelers pick. They probably will consider Rashawn Evans. They showed a lot of interest in him. He didn't really test fully, though, because he's still recovering from that groin. He had 2 groin injuries in college. I wonder how much that's going to hurt him in the eyes of teams. But he's not as rangy as Ryan Shazier, but he's just the way he developed this year as a reader, as a processor. his physicality, of the way that he plays the game, I think it's going to really appeal to the Steelers coaching staff. I don't think he'll be the top player on their board, but if some of the other guys that they like more come off the board ahead of him and they don't feel great about trading down, I could definitely see them taking Rashaan Evans, and I would be overjoyed by that type of pick. So probably, short answer is probably Evans and Van Der Esch in round 1 would be my guess. In round 2, hopefully Fred Warner. I haven't heard much, but hopefully Fred Warner and definitely Jefferson.
Would you be surprised if they went with an offensive player at all in the first round, whether it be an offensive lineman or maybe a receiver or potentially even a running back to fill in behind Le'Veon Bell?
The Steelers are pretty wide open in the first round. I can 100% guarantee you they won't take an offensive lineman that early. I can almost 100% guarantee you they won't take a wide receiver that early. The options that they could go with, I wouldn't completely rule out quarterback, but I think it's way less likely than other people. People just Ben's getting older. Mason Rudolph could be there. Let's just throw a lazy mock draft pick at him, and give him Mason Rudolph. It really isn't a fit. It's not a fit, really. Outside of a million other things, it's not really a fit. I think that the Steelers are doing by looking at quarterbacks is they're just kind of starting their dry run process in terms of being able to eventually find a replacement for Ben. The first year they'll just, what do we want in a quarterback? What kind of questions do we want to ask them in meetings? What's the traits that are important to us both on and off the field, the way they conduct themselves, all those kind of things. You're just kind of preparing themselves because it is such an important position. You want to almost get a head start on that. And then next year we could probably talk seriously about quarterback for Pittsburgh, or perhaps even the year after if Ben plays 3 years, as he's kind of indicated that he will. So I think that you can almost take those 3 positions off the board for the Steelers. I wouldn't totally rule out tight end, even though I would like to rule it out, but I just don't think there's a tight end it's worth it in this class, nor do I think it's close to the biggest need for Pittsburgh. I know there'll be players I like more than, at that point on the board than any of the tight ends in the class that would still help Pittsburgh out more. Vance McDonald was really terrific for the Steelers when he was on the field last year. The problem was he was banged up. That hasn't really been a huge issue for him his career, but it was last year. He's coming back despite his cap hit, which isn't huge, but substantial enough that some people thought he might not make it back, but they were really happy with him. I mean, he tore up Jacksonville. He made Barry Church look silly in that playoff game. And so, I think he could have a huge year if he stays healthy. They don't have much depth outside of that. Jesse James has been kind of a disappointment. So I could see it being a need, but again, I just don't think they should prioritize it. They've wanted a downfield vertical type threat. I think McDonald's that guy. They might think Gesicki's the better fit in that type of role. So he's a guy I could see perhaps. And then the only really offensive position, and I wouldn't even say position, the only other player, I think Darius Geis is an option for them. I don't think he'll be on the board. I really think he'll be off the board. Tons of interest ahead of the Steelers too. But you never know with running backs. It's not the teams can love a guy at running back, do all their homework on him, but at the end of the day, they just prefer other positions. They're just valued more. So if he slides, that's the one guy I could see them pulling the trigger on early at running back that they've really shown a ton of interest in. Talked to him at the combine, had a formal with him. Took him out to dinner before his pro day. That's usually a pretty strong indicator of significant interest for the Steelers. And so they did that with Geis, and I think that the interest is very real. Geis himself told me that the meeting went super well, and he really, really enjoys Pittsburgh. So I think that it bodes well for that if the scenario does play out. I don't think they make a move up to get him, though, and I don't think he's on the board. So I really do think it'll be a defensive player.
Speaking of running back, it being potentially Le'Veon Bell's last year in Pittsburgh, is there a mid to late round running back? If Geis isn't there at 28 and they're trying to pick one at maybe pick 92 or even later, maybe like 180, 148, is there a running back that you think would fit well, or who would you hope that the Steelers would be targeting in that situation?
I mean, I honestly would stay away from it. To be honest, I would stay away from the position. If you're not going to draft the guy, and some people's like, it's just a running back. You can find him in the mid rounds, and you find Le'Veon Bell in the second round. Well, Le'Veon Bell wasn't the same player in college that he was in the NFL. There's no question about that. No matter how much you like Le'Veon Bell coming out, you never thought he'd be this in the NFL, because, everything changed when he got to Pittsburgh. You get into a solid culture and, you establish a work ethic and you get guys around you that are going to push you, then you start to become a different type of player. He goes somewhere else. This may not all have happened. So he became a different player in Pittsburgh. I just don't think that you're going to find somebody that's able to replace what he gives you. And let's be honest, the Steelers Super Bowl window is, they don't really lose much next year, other than Bell, so if they can find a guy to replace Bell, the window stays open, but Bell is not just any running back. He's so important to Pittsburgh because this guy plays almost every single snap. He hardly ever comes off the field. He lines up a wide receiver. He's an elite pass protector. He's a terrific running back, so there's just nothing he does poorly. And he has asked him so much of the Steelers offense. I mean, the guy runs a full route tree as a running back. So it's just not a position. If the Steelers are going to keep their window open and keep using a running back with the value that they apply to Le'Veon Bell, but they're not going to pay Bell what Bell wants, which is just insane amount of money that someone will give him, but not Pittsburgh. I don't blame them for not wanting to give Bell that money, but you've got to go out and you've got to get a guy that's of his caliber that can do some of those types of things. So if you can't do that in round 1, you're not going to do it in round 3. So I would just ignore the position and play with Bell this year. He's going to be on the field all the time anyway, no matter who you draft, and then draft a guy next year. You get the full contract, with a running back. It's probably your top need, provided you hit on some guys this year and people stay healthy. It may have probably your top need going into next year's draft. It's a need that you can find if you're drafting at the back end of the first round in most years. So I think that they could still fill that need next year in the draft. They could get the full contract term for that player, as a rookie, and then moving forward as a starter, and he would be on the field because this likely is Bell's last season in Pittsburgh if they don't sign him long term. So personally, I'd probably ignore the position, just wait it out, ride with Bell. James Conner looked really good last year. He's coming off another injury, so that would be the one situation where I'd say, look at that, and if he's good to go, then you're good to go. But Stephen Ridley was good, and he'll be back as the third running back. So they'll add a guy at some point just because that's what teams do. Day 3, I think a guy like Darrell Williams from LSU honestly fits some of the things that they want. A guy that can carry the ball, but is also a better receiver than people give him credit for. If you're in day 3, he's about as good as it gets in terms of that type. The other guy that I know they'll be interested in. They were at his pro day. The running back coach was there. Kalen Balaj is a guy they're going to be interested in. I think his stable leaves a ton to be desired. His vision is very poor. His decision making as a running back is poor. I question his physicality a lot as a back, but he is a talented pass catcher that has size and has speed, and they love those types of players, and they think they can fix the rest. So time will tell if they can, but I guarantee you they really target. It wouldn't be surprising to me if Balaj is their third round pick.
I was going to bring up Balaj. I was thinking maybe in the mid rounds that would be a fit for them. And I do want to ask you kind of a selfish question. Do you think Sonny Michel, if he's on the board, do you selfishly want him at 28?
I want him, but it would depend on who else is on the board. I want a player. I want a linebacker or a safety or a pass rusher because those are the guys that will help the Steelers win at this point. But if none of those guys are, if there's not good value at any of those spots and you can't trade down, I'm not even sure Michelle will be on the board. I would love to have him, but Pittsburgh won't take him because they like taller running backs. That's just kind of, they like guys that are bigger. I know it's weird, but it's just kind of their thing. When they value a running back and they really, think he could be a guy that plays a big part in the future, he is always ideally sized. 220 is 230, somewhere around that size. So I know they won't like him, or they'll probably like him, but they won't take him that high. But yeah, personally, I would love it.
Awesome. Well, John, I really appreciate your time, man. That's all we got for you. Where can we find you on Twitter?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Ledyard, Ledyard, NFL Draft.
Be sure to follow John on Twitter. Of course, follow Brad at BradKelly17. Give me a follow as well at Russ NFL Draft. Until next time, this is Cover One, the NFL Draft podcast.